OBS. It's Thursday, December 12th, 2024. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we're going to be talking about knives. Oh, yeah. So, I found something recently, like really recently, that I forgot about. And so, back when Zappos was a thing, like it existed. And
it's still a thing.
Not really. Go look at their selection. Like they stopped using them a long, long time ago. But there was an ancient time, like when we lived in Beacon, in the early days of living here, I bought all my shoes there, like 100% of them.
That was before Amazon bought them.
Yep.
So, and before the CEO died of too much drugs.
Yep. And I remember the moment I stopped using them.
What do you mean their selection's bad? They got the Christmas Crocs right here. What are you talking about?
Let me see.
Special edition.
Like 4 years ago, I went there.
Squid Game Crocs.
Okay,
Look,
let's see if they have the shoes I buy. They do not have the Nikes that I run with. Let's see if they have the old Nikes I used to run with. They do not have those shoes either. Anyway, they went way downhill a long time ago, at least for me as a sports shoe buying person. But at some point between 2009 and 2010, I bought 2 pairs of sneakers on Zappos. One of those pairs I wore until they wore out and I threw them away. And the other pair, when they arrived, they were like, I bought shoes back when you and I were talking about this. I think we talked about it at Geek Nights. I wanted to get shoes to leave at the office, like just nice hush puppies or like comfortable and don't get beat up. And then I have other shoes that I wear like out in the street. And when I got them, they look cool, but they had a weird, like you had to lace them a weird way. And there was like instructions in the box. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this right now. So I put them back in the box and left them in the closet. I forgot about that until a few weeks ago. And I found these shoes completely unused, unworn, unlaced. Okay. So I laced them up. I figured out the complicated lacing scheme, and it wasn't that complicated. It took about twice as long as like normally lacing shoes because you have to like do it in the opposite direction, but it worked fine. And these shoes look good. So I wore them to work, and people complimented me on my shoes, which is something that is, other than wearing Vibrams, has never happened in my life. People were like, "Oh, did you get new shoes?"
Maybe it's like, since they're old, maybe some sneaker collecting people are like, "Whoa."
So then in the evening, one of my feet hurts. And not in the like the normal quote breaking in of a shoe unquote, which has nothing to do with breaking in a shoe and has more to do with callus patterns on people's feet. But it was a different pain. It was the kind of pain you get from a sports injury. So I suspected the shoes immediately, because the last time I had a foot problem in my life was because I wore the same shoes for like 800 miles of running, and I got plantar fasciitis. I went to a doctor, and the doctor said, "How long have you had your current running shoes?" And he interrupted me and said, "Buy new shoes. That'll fix your problem. What's wrong with you?" So I wore them a little bit one more time to confirm, and I figured out the problem. So I'm going to give these shoes away or maybe sell them because they're like decade-old hush puppies that apparently people like the look of. They are too short top-wise, and I have a very pronounced arch because I'm athletic. Like, I have a strong arch, like I run a lot. And if you compress the arch of the foot of someone who has a strong arch and runs and is an athlete in any way with their feet, that can actually cause significant sports injuries because it prevents the proper flexing of the foot. Now,
if you squeeze any part of your body out of shape, that's gonna mess you up. It's like your body, it's like, come on, it's just common sense.
But if you're not athletic and have flat feet, like messed up feet, then it might not be a problem. So basically, I can't wear these shoes, so I gotta get rid of them. So I have some shoes from 2009.
Even Zappos ain't gonna take a return that late.
Next, I should send my Nintendo Power survey back. Because I found one of those.
A subscription card from the Nintendo Power.
I have the subscription card that we got back when we first subscribed to Nintendo Power. My mom
call the pro wrestling hotline.
So in the news, kind of a big news happened, and a lot happened since then. I'm sure you've read about it. If you don't know what we're talking about, go read real news sites.
If you don't read enough normal news to even know this kind of news, and you listen to Geek Nights, what?
Yeah.
You need to be reading normal news before you spend time listening to Geek Nights.
So, the CEO of a healthcare company was assassinated in Midtown Manhattan recently, if you didn't see the news. And it was a big enough deal. Like, I work in Midtown. It happened kind of near my office. And, like, we got security alerts and, like, everybody freaked out. And what was interesting immediately is I discovered at that moment who in my collected workosphere that Rim's Worksona pretends to be a professional in reads the internet at all versus people who don't. Because there were three waves of people.
Already?
There was now I've discovered the true map because there are actually three classes of those people in my workosphere. Class 1 had no idea this happened, like oblivious to the world. Class 2 heard it happened and assumed it was random street violence, which not common. Like that doesn't really happen much, especially in Midtown.
I mean, I assumed that for like a fraction of a second while I was reading. I was like, read words. Oh, read more words.
Yep. No, that was the same thing.
Your mind puts the story together as you go. If you stop reading after just 3 words, I would have thought.
Yep. So third group of people read words on the internet and realized it wasn't like it was a big deal story and not a like random shooting story.
Yeah, basically when I was reading the words, my initial thought was, everyone's gonna think it was an assassin who was mad about not getting their healthcare coverage.
Yeah,
but it's probably something else. Nope, actually, that's absolutely what it is. 100%. Okay.
So the moment I realized was reading.
It was similar to 9/11, where I was like, people are gonna say it's terrorism. It was terrorism.
Yep.
Oops.
But for me, it was specifically when, like, in the second paragraph of the article, like that popped up that I read, and I was like kind of chatting with a coworker who was reading the same article, and I noticed something interesting. I noticed that nobody reported hearing a gunshot, and the next line was someone claimed the gun appeared to have a silencer. Now, that kind of claim in breaking news is often wrong. Like, just like when there's a mass shooting, almost everyone says...
Eyewitnesses are super unreliable.
And nobody knows what a fucking silencer looks like.
They know what one looks like in a Hollywood movie.
Yep. But
a little black cylinder stuck at the end of a gun where you think there should be nothing.
Yep. And it makes a little, like, boop noise when you shoot it, which is not how silencers work normally. Yep. But being an internet person who's played Counter-Strike and knows things... that triggered something for me because I immediately realized if it is true that no one heard a gunshot, silencer or no silencer, that implies the shooter used subsonic ammunition. So that's the only way to make a gun quiet. And subsonic ammunition is already a thing that most people have never heard of. And already this is sounding more like someone who knew what they were doing. And then I saw that little video that was making the rounds, and it was like a movie-style assassination, like the calmly walking forward, firing a gun from a dark corner. Obviously, it was an assassination, and then pretty soon after, the police were like, especially when the shell casings had those 3 words written on them, which Amazon has now banned from any listings.
Yeah. And then I heard some conspiracy theories that were like, somebody was trying to, this CEO was less evil than the other health insurance CEOs, and they wanted to shut him up at some, right? And then, so they faked this to make it look like a disgruntled, and it's like, that's conspiracy talk.
Yep.
That's obviously not true.
Now, not like read the news about the details of what happened. What I actually want to talk about, and again, I want to preface this with something very important. I and Geek Nights are not advocating anything. We are simply reporting on news that is being reported because there is a fascinating phenomenon happening, and this isn't just an internet thing. The reaction from a wide range of people in real life, online, not just in nerd and edgelord circles, but like in regular places that regular people go, ranged from indifference to celebration. More people... Even Republicans. Yep. Like, at PAX, I overheard strangers talking about this in a neutral to positive manner in, like, random conversations I overheard around work, outside, on trains. Like, people are talking about it. And again, the reactions are ranging from indifferent to positive. The media are covering this sort of directly as like, this is an outrage, reward, assassination, whatever. Like, oh, it's a big deal. But if you look at like any press that isn't like the CNN, MSNBC, Fox News type stuff, there's a lot of articles pointing out that people seem to be celebrating this, and this is everywhere. Now, that implies something important. Again, I'm not saying assassinate people. What I'm saying is it is very telling that in the year 2024, considering the state of the world, the state of the United States, the state of healthcare, the anger everywhere, our political situation, that there is a class of people who are extremely terrified that this happened, and there is a broader class of people across a wide range of the social sphere that are indifferent to positive on this. And it's only
and yet
escalating.
they voted for someone who's on the side of the guy who got killed.
Yep. But like GoFundMe's appeared that got shut down. So much merch for Luigi the character was sold that like it's sold out everywhere. Amazon has been constantly taking down like pro assassination t-shirts. They're like, read the news about this. I think yesterday
we should make some what's the guy? I can't remember the guy's name anymore. The world guy who shot at the start of World War One. The whatever his name.
Princip.
Archduke Ferdinand, right?
Actually, I should link to something because the shooting of Archduke Ferdinand. How do you think it went down? Like from memory, I'm just curious. Like, what do you?
I mean, I all I remember was they showed a photo of a car, right? But obviously it wasn't a sniper like JFK because it was 19 whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
Right? So 14 something like, right? And so I since there's no video of it, it's not like they had an iPhone down in the streets of Austria, whatever, right? I always had just imagined that someone just like walked up to the car and shot him and ran away.
So it's actually a lot crazier than that. There were a bunch of conspirators. Several of them, part of the reason they did it was that they perceived the world as going to shit and they were worried about like big wars and injustice and whatever. But also they were dying of tuberculosis and figured, why not do something good with the tiny bit of my life that I have left?
Well, that's similar to Luigi here, who was suffering from illness, right? So
yep. So
that the insurance company clearly wouldn't pay for.
Like not to put a really big sort of downer, serious note on Geek Nights before we get into a fun chat about knives and Interstella 5555, but this feels like a symptom of a widespread upheaval that I think we're in the middle of World War III. Just like in the 20s, we were at the beginning of World War II. I think a lot of shit is coming.
I mean, clearly a lot of shit is coming, but, you know, Rim is always the person who freaks out over every single news, and then the next day the sun rises. So
like what?
I'm not gonna say it's World War III until it's World War III.
I mean, I called that Russia was invading Ukraine, and I was deeply right about that well in advance.
Okay, and
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I can do anything about it, but I think the fact that the media and like sort of the zeitgeist of America expected outrage from the population at this assassination, and instead the result was what it was, really says a lot about the anger and the societal problems that are escalating in America. That every American, no matter what they think they believe politically, has been so harmed by the insurance and medical industry in the United States, a country that spends the most on healthcare over any other country in the world and yet provides, honestly, not great care for a lot of Americans.
Right. Well, I think this is the problem, right? So the media, even the good, normal, truth-telling media, right, is they're afraid to like talk positively about an assassin, right? And rightly so. Like, you know, we don't want assassinations, right? That's not the right way to solve these problems, right? We would rather solve them with the justice system that would be hopefully functioning properly.
Just like we'd hope that war doesn't happen.
That would lead to a much more healthy society. Right?
Yep, just like war sucks, we should try to solve issues, no matter how dire they are, with diplomacy first.
But yet, when they strongly condemn this kind of violence in the normal media, right? And they don't want to, you know, talk positively about it in any way. But when health insurance companies murder people, when cars murder people, when someone with a factory that pollutes and gives cancer to a whole town murders people, they don't treat those murderers, mass murderers, right, the same way that they treat Luigi or someone who shoots up a school.
There weren't
who's eating-
manhunts like this for the 16 shootings that happened other than that one in a similar period of time.
Right. So when a company, right, murders people, a whole town of people indirectly with its pollution, or gives cancer to a zillion people with its, products that have, are tainted, or a food, someone selling, poison food gives a bunch of people E. coli, the media, the truth-telling media that didn't lie about anything, they should be treating those corporate executives the way that Luigi is being treated by them now, because, and in fact, even worse, because they're mass murderers. And that's exactly why, right, people are on the Luigi side here, because even though most people don't look to say someone who's killed indirectly by climate change or someone who's killed indirectly by various means, the healthcare murdering executives, right? Everyone can draw a direct line of, I was at the hospital and I was dying, and this company said, just die.
I mean, not
right?
for nothing.
There's not the ambiguity of the separation of, I died from this thing that was far away from, pick an evil CEO, I guess, right? Oil company executive, right? It's like when a car hits you, it's kind of hard to make that connection to Exxon CEO, right? Even though they did kill you indirectly, or Ford CEO or whatever, right? But when the hospital is trying to save you, you don't blame the hospital. The doctor is trying to treat you, and you end up telling the doctor, no, don't help me. I have no money, right? People have this direct lived experience, and they can line it up and say, that's the guys at fault, and that's why they were targeted, and that's why you're not going to see someone who is hit by a car trying to assassinate Elon Musk if they were killed by a Tesla, for example.
Well, because American healthcare is just even people who have good insurance have a really bad time with American healthcare. It is I would say it's shocking, but it's not shocking that the richest country in the world has such a crappy healthcare system. It's very not actually shocking. What's the old meme you see in military analyst circles? Country X is about to find out why Americans don't have healthcare.
Yeah. And the thing that baffles me the most, and I don't want to, we could talk about it for the whole episode, but this will be the last thing I say about it, is that it's clearly popular to get, other than the people who, run and work for these insurance companies, right? Mm-hmm. It's very popular amongst everyone else to eliminate private health insurance and just have the same free health insurance that every other country has, that thanks to the internet we know about, because no one else, without the internet, Americans wouldn't know about that, except for a few who have been to other countries.
In case
I only
you
heard
aren't
rumors
aware
about that.
Out there, America is literally the only industrialized country on earth that doesn't have public health care.
Right. And so, once we learned about that,
a lot of non-industrialized countries have public health care.
We said, that's obviously better. Why don't we have that? So now there's a bunch of people that know about it and want it and advocate for it. But neither of the two major political parties in the United States put that at the forefront of their platforms. Right?
So the Democrats did when we passed Obamacare, the ACA.
No, they said Bernie was coming through, and he was and they're like, no, Bernie, we don't want you.
Well, so
right?
how that went down, and it actually, I'm saying this only because it's literally true. Otherwise, I wouldn't
Kamala
say this
Harris
word.
could have just come out and been like, I'm for 100% eliminate all private health. She didn't do that. She could. Joe Biden, as progressive as he was, most progressive president ever, did not openly, every time he talked about healthcare, he could have said, I advocate eliminating all private insurance.
So I think I can say
them,
why.
Put them out of business, and right, he never said that.
I think I know why.
They could have said that
because
they didn't.
When
right?
that
and Republicans obviously don't say that.
So when that was said, when the ACA was being put together and passed, and when it was said when Hillary Clinton, but way back in the day when Bill was president, was advocating
she did say it way back in the day.
But in both cases, in polling among voters, it was deeply unpopular because people don't understand it and got mad about it. Similar to how the Affordable Care Act is very popular. Yet, if you ask voters if they support it, a majority of them will say no, depending on how you ask the question. Right. Because they don't understand it.
The point is that you could just fucking do it. Right?
Well, you can't just do it.
If either party actually did it, right?
Well, what do you mean actually did it? Doing it required passing the filibuster.
Right. We're not talking about this now.
But that's the only way to do it is pass the filibuster. Pass a bill.
You can, right? the Republicans could do it, and then you know what? How would Democrats ever win again?
Except they wouldn't.
Why don't they do it?
Well, obviously because they don't want there to be good health care.
I'm just saying, right? But it's like,
but the Democrats. So when we
there are
pass
other
the ACA,
countries with evil dictators who put forth, right, free health care for the people to maintain their popularity.
Well, thus,
so it's like, why even in the United States, no one's smart enough to do that.
Well, thus the fundamental divide. The Republicans won't do it on principle because they're just evil as a party. Like that, they just won't. Just like they won't put forth a lot of things that would be obvious wins for them to cement their power. They just don't. The Democrats actually had enough votes to put single payer in the original ACA. The problem is they didn't have enough votes to also to pass the filibuster with single payer.
I'm just saying.
They had enough votes to do one, but not both. And they barely had enough to do even the first one because no Republican would vote for it. So
clearly there's support for it. So
well, there is until you poll people and people are stupid and they say they'll vote against it.
Just ignore that. Don't worry about that.
But again, how do you get people to vote
if you
for
go,
it?
Just go out and in your campaign be pro Luigi, right? Not pro assassination, but pro insurance companies suck. Put your campaign on that at the forefront of your campaign. Talk about evil corporations. Don't take corporate money. Don't have lobbyists. Anything lobbyists come to you with, do the opposite, right? That's the one thing that unites the Democrats and the Republicans is there's a hate for corporate America hurting the people. And if you come out against the corporations, right, you can win an election,
now,
I believe.
Republicans won't do that
States.
in practice for obvious reasons, but Democrats are tricky because generally people who do that lose their primaries. So what you would have to do is not say that, somehow win your primary anyway, and then start saying it for the general election.
Regardless, I think that is a unifying... Luigi has shown that there is a unifying factor, right? There's not a lot of unifying things in this world right now in any country. This is a thing that unifies people.
Yeah, but
right?
I think it's because it hurts
the U.S. healthcare system.
It hurts
and
so closely.
You should,
even
whoever you are, you should jump on that.
Even a really bad person probably has like a relative who went bankrupt because of healthcare problems.
Yeah.
In some other much lighter news, a while back, it was announced that Interstella 5555, which if you've never seen it, holy shit, just Google it and watch it, was getting a remaster and a one-night only screening.
It's not
in
one night
theaters.
only, it's a few nights.
Oh, the article said
Depending on
one
where
day
you live.
only.
Yeah, that's what they originally said, but if you go on Fandango or whatever, you can see it's like 4 or 5 nights at several theaters. There's several screenings. But regardless, the little trailer they showed at first glance looked amazing. Like, wow, we got to go see this, right? Yeah, finally. But then when people looked closer, they said, wait a minute, is this trailer just an AI, machine learning garbage upscale? They didn't really remaster it properly.
Yep.
And that's what the trailer was. And so it's like, well, okay, they did that for the trailer, but is that, there was still a question of some lingering doubt, obviously not likely, but still possible, that the actual movie you saw in theaters wasn't going to be like the trailer. They just threw out a quick trailer like that. And they really did do a remaster somehow. Knowing the history of the film, it was questionable how, but somehow. And then, of course, now it has been confirmed by people who have seen the remaster and reviewed it that no, it really is just a all they did was take whatever they had and run it through a machine learning upscaler, and it's garbage, and the old DVD is still better.
Yep, there's no reason to go see this. The only reason I even remembered is when it was announced, I put a reminder in my calendar the day before tickets would go on sale to have figured out by then whether or not it would be worth seeing, and obviously I have not bought tickets. But this review, I'll link to the review on Anime News Network because they go deep into why there aren't remasters of it, and there's a lot of information here, and I cannot stress
animated
enough.
in France in the PAL frame rate, and then it goes like this. So the U.S. releases with NTSC are messed up, and it's not like it's on a reel of film somewhere, and it wasn't even anyway.
Yeah, but if you don't know what this is, it's a Leiji Matsumoto animated music video to the entirety.
Leiji Matsumoto's actual involvement with it is overstated, but it is obviously heavily, influenced by him, and he does have some relation to it.
And it was Toei that did it. Like Toei put it together.
But it's a French animation it's literally a one long music video to the Daft Punk album Discovery, because the Daft Punk guys, they watched all kinds of Harlock growing up, so they did this on purpose. And they just, instead of making music videos, they just made an animation that's as long as the album, and then they chopped it up, and the album is the only audio you hear. And every song has a music video, which is effectively one scene of the 3-minute scene of the movie.
And it tells a pretty good story for a music video with no dialogue.
It's an anti-evil record company story, right? And it's a, pro music story. It's amazing movie. You should see it. Just don't see this fake 4K
I remember
non-remaster
when we got a copy of it and we showed it to the RIT Anime Club on that big screen. That was one of our most packed showings. And people, the thing happened that would happen usually only after when we do a marathon and people see all of Cowboy Bebop in one go. But when it ended, everyone just sat there in silence, mulling it over. And then they all stood up and clapped, and it was a good time. God, that was back in 2003, 2004 when we did that.
Yeah, it's surprisingly old.
I mean, we were still in college running the RIT Anime Club. But anyway, things of the day. Even though it's Thursday, I got another animation-related thing. So there's a lot of Star Treks. But one of the Star Treks that doesn't have that many episodes was an animated Star Trek that isn't Lower Decks, and it was made a long time ago, in the 70s, on basically zero budget. And it's actually pretty good. So some of the episodes are pretty good. But what is not well known and not widely seen is that in the 70s, they made a 36-second PSA against pollution as a concept. And someone took this, and it isn't really remastered so much as restored. This is probably the highest quality version of this old PSA that exists on Earth, because nobody gives a shit about this thing. But
old cartoons back in the day, for a variety of reasons, had these little PSAs.
Yep. But what's sad about it,
the more you know,
is that the moral of it is humans were polluting the planet. But then people pointed out that pollution is uncomfortable and sucks. And once people realized how bad pollution was, they all stopped doing it. And then Kirk's like, yes, all they had to do was realize that pollution sucks. And they stopped doing it. And here we are in the year 2024. So what do you got?
So I like a rubber stamp. A rubber stamp is one of those things, there's some people who are way into rubber stamps. But it's one of those things that's I really enjoy a rubber stamp, but it's I can't be going out buying rubber stamps and getting cool ink pads and shit like that, because what the heck am I going to stamp? It's right? That's not a thing I'm actually going to use. So I just enjoy the art, the craft of rubber stamps, right? Without actually involving myself. But I came across this rubber stamp set that I'm not going to buy that contains 16 separate stamps. It is called Lord of Maps. And all of the stamps resemble the features that you will see on maps drawn by J.R.R. Tolkien in Lord of the Rings books. You've got, mountain, differently angled mountain, big mountain, tree, single tree, hill, bunch of trees, lake, those kind of things. Volcano with smoke coming out.
These look so good.
And so if you had these stamps and you had some nice ink available to you to use with the stamps, you could combine them intelligently to produce a J.R.R. Tolkien style map, to look like, I guess it wouldn't be Middle Earth, but I guess you tried to copy the map exactly. Yeah. But you could make, I don't know, side Earth, top Earth, bottom Earth, behind Earth, outside Earth, inside Earth, something like that. And so if you're a map-making type person, maybe you're making some RPG zines or just a map for your little campaign that's Tolkien-esque or anything like that, these stamps might come in handy. And they're only $40. And then you got to buy ink yourself, which you could get some high-quality ink pads somewhere.
That's not a bad deal, because in the year 1994, I purchased a floppy disk that had for $70 US, 1994 US dollars, for a program called Campaign Cartographer that was just to make maps that kind of look like this for D&D games.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't
And
have a
so
good way to
it
print
would
them.
be even better if they released, like another set, like Lord of Maps 2. Then you could really get crazy. You know,
Oh,
they
yeah.
could include like little villages or a little river. You know, I guess you had to draw the rivers yourself. They're just lines.
You know what this would be good for? Just to put a little tiny map like on envelopes around the holidays that you send to people.
Sure, that's another good use of stamps.
Yeah.
Many
The meta
good uses
moment.
of rubber stamps.
Yeah. The Geek Nights panel at PAX Unplugged went well. It'll be on YouTube this weekend. I'm mostly done cobbling it all together. We will be live at MagFest with a bunch of lectures. I will be live. I doubt Scott will come at ZenkaiCon with a bunch of lectures. We're very likely going to be live at PAX East. And otherwise, it's the holidays. We'll see how many shows we do toward the end of the year. But I'm not traveling anywhere, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm. How's your book club situation? Which, you know, it was one thing when we didn't do the book club for Tale of Genji because the book was long and difficult to read. It's another thing entirely where you've actually chosen a book, but you haven't gone through the effort to actually choose the ISBN number.
I mean, I was just going to do all of them, but your like weirdly visceral reaction to not wanting to read those books kind of turned me off.
I'm just saying, I just disapproved, but I got the other choice, which I forgot what it was more meh, I guess. So,
because I mean, they're not long. I would say just read all of them.
You choose whatever you chose, but you have not updated the website or given any instruction.
Mostly it was a reaction to the fact that you seemed so displeased that I kind of soured on the whole.
You didn't do
project.
anything. You did just do something.
Yep, I kind of just soured on it because you don't seem to want to read them in the first place. I don't feel like it'd be a good episode.
I mean, you could do. You chose the book that you gave two choices. I picked one.
Yep, I think I'll do a separate thing on those, and I'll just pick a different book for next week.
Just change what you're picking now, just because I'm meh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great power. I
think it's fine because honestly, book club episodes.
I've avoided the two choice situation. Now I could just meh your two choices and always get a third choice. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it'll probably make better episodes. If you're not into it, there's no point in doing it.
I'll just pick something.
Yep, I'm gonna pick something
we
different.
We have it. The book club has been on hiatus. It's all your fault.
Yeah, that's fine. I've been busy. Anyway, let's talk about.
I don't even know when did we pick the book. It's been like super long time.
So let's talk about knives, which loomed. It's interesting. When I was a kid, like Cub Scout age, knives loomed large in my life because, like, Cub Scout kid, you always had to have a knife on you because, like, you'd use it for stuff like kid stuff.
For some reason, people, when they're thinking about outdoorsy tools, knife is always the first one.
Yep. Now, honestly, like, a lot of that is kid nonsense. Like, even when we go camping, I usually don't bring a knife. Like, there's no point.
I think it's kid nonsense. It's, the forbidden thing is always,
there's a whole Simpsons episode about this.
I want it. Right? Yeah.
Bart goes on that odyssey and almost dies, all because he wanted to have a knife.
Yep, exactly.
And as a kid, I use knives a lot, but I used them for Cub Scout stuff exclusively. Whittling and like cutting stuff when we were camping with the Cub Scouts. And in no other part of my life.
Also in the kitchen.
Well, kitchen knives I do want to talk about because that's a different thing. When I was a kid, I didn't think about or care about kitchen knives. There just were kitchen knives. And as a kid, I kind of just picked a random one because I didn't know better whenever I needed a knife. Now I know a lot about knives. Now I care a lot about knives.
So the reason I thought about this episode, right, is because actually of not a knife, or maybe yes, a knife, if I don't know how pedantic you are, but because of a scissor. So I have this scissor. It's the Fiskars. It's the best scissor. I've had it for super long time. It's the best. It's like a Fiskar, like 9-in-1, right? It's like it's got like a box opener and a bottle opener, and it's like it does all this shit, but it looks just like a scissor. But it's like this multi-use, multi-everything. And the thing is, you can actually take the two halves of the scissor apart, and one of the sides is basically just a knife, right?
Yeah.
Like you can use it like a knife. The other side, I guess technically is still a knife because it has a sharp edge, but you couldn't really use it like a knife on its own so much because of the shape of it. But the point is, a scissor is two knives. And anyway, I lost this scissor. I don't know where the fuck it is. How could I possibly lose a giant?
I still have the multi-tool that we got two of from the early days of Amazon.
Yeah. Well, yeah. How could I lose a giant, scissor like this? It has to be in this apartment somewhere. It's not like I took it out somewhere. Yeah. It's not like it went in the garbage. I don't know. Where the hell is it? I need it. I use it so frequently and I've had it so long that really, like, for household doings, that's really, even though only half of it is knife shaped when you take it apart, that half knife is basically anything that's not kitchen knifery. That's what I use, is that thing. It's like, that is so functional for every day in a normal person's house, not doing, tool-y, hardware-y kind of work, just household work, cutting up a box or whatever. That's where it's at.
Yep. So I have an old, like, flip out utility knife, like a really short one. It's like 3 inches long that we leave near the door. And I just use that for opening packages. And the only knives we really bring when we're camping and hiking, if we do bring them, we have one, like, chopping kitchen knife that's designed for camping and has like a thin, like, it has a case so you can bring it in your camping. And that's literally just to, like, chop potatoes and onions when we're cooking dinner, like, out in the woods. And if we need a knife to do anything other than cooking food, we actually have one really nice knife that Emily heard we were doing this topic and walked in so I can show it to everybody on the screen. We have a Finnish lap knife, which is just a very nice one-handed knife that is generally useful and durable and cool.
Okay.
That's a good knife. Good style, nice and compact, good to bring in the woods. But other than that, most of my thinking about knives in my daily life is around using the correct knife in the kitchen for the correct task in the kitchen with the correct technique.
It's like, if it's a bread, you got to get the serrated knife.
The bread knife. Or possibly a deli knife. There's a little bit of distinction there.
Almost everything you're going to be using just a chef knife, right? Like an 8-inch chef knife, whatever, right? Can do almost anything. You don't really need another knife, but you might have the santoku, which has the different shape. And
I find the santoku to be the most versatile, useful knife. Like, that's the default knife I use in the kitchen.
Usually use it for basically, because most of the time you cut something that's not a bread. You're cutting a vegetable, right? You cut a meat less often, I'd say. And so that's basically a vegetable chopper, right? That's what it is. And so, it is a very versatile knife. The chef knife can do the vegetable or the meat, so it actually has more, but the santoku is a little bit more specialized to the vegetable. And vegetable is the thing you cut most often. So it could be good to have. I actually don't have one. But it's like I just got 2 chef knives instead.
Yeah, let's see. We've got one. So we have a cleaver, but we almost never use it because
it's interesting how, like, I never use a cleaver. I never need one really, but there's some chefs I've seen, like, especially like Chinese chefs you see on TV. They use the cleaver for fucking everything. They got like a mega sharp cleaver and they do everything with that. Just cleaver everything. Garlic. Whether it's a garlic or a giant meat or whatever.
As a kid, we didn't even have a cleaver in the house.
We didn't either.
We have a cleaver only because a relative had 2 by accident and they're really nice. So just gave us the other one and it's just in the kitchen. And let's see, what did I use it for? I used it once to cut a big gourd open in 2. Like a really tough gourd. I just whacked it and you know what? It cleaved. It cleaved really well.
Yeah. That's what it's really for.
The problem is cleavers, proper heavy cleavers, are hard to use in any environment where you do not have a standalone butcher block. Because even a thick cutting board on, like, a Formica or a counter that isn't, like, thick, heavy marble or something, it's like there's a little bit of reverberation and it's like not a good feeling. You really want to use a cleaver on a full-size butcher block.
I mean, I see chefs on TV using it just on same as everything else. So maybe don't hit so hard.
Yeah, depends on what you're cutting,
I guess. But yeah, there's several knives that you can use in the kitchen. You get your paring knives, you got, all kinds. Steak knives, butter knives, right? Which aren't really sharp, right?
Yep. The mistake I used to make
it's funny that someone might say that a scissor is not a knife or a scissor is not 2 knives stuck together. But then they'll say a butter knife is a knife, even though the butter knife is dull AF.
Yeah, butter knife is just a stick. It's just a flat stick.
It's just a flat stick. How sharp does it have to be to where it becomes knife and is no longer just piece of metal?
But I guess as I got older, it was actually right around when we moved to the city, like 2009, 2010, when I started to pay a lot of attention to the correct technique of using the different kinds of knives and also getting rid of old shitty knives that I just happened to own and buying a set of specific knives that I liked that we used for specific purposes. I got rid of almost every knife I own because a lot of them were just
you could have just sharpened, right? That's the thing is you see these.
Well, no, a
YouTube
lot of them were just
videos.
like crappy knives with like bad handles. Like they were like hand-me-downs from the family that
someone
I took to
has some
college with me.
crappy. Someone has some crappy knife that's like from the dollar store, and they sharpen it, and it's amazing because they sharpened it. But the thing is, if the metal it's made of is not very durable, or it's not comfortable to hold, or the shape of it isn't conducive to the actual things you're going to be doing with it, it's like, yeah, it's sharp, it's going to dull quickly, right? It might even break. You might hurt yourself because holding it is awkward, right? It's like, so when you buy a knife, it's like, of course, when you buy a new knife, if it's a high quality one, it's going to start off mega sharp because they don't sell you a dull one. That would be foolish, right?
Yeah.
But you're really buying what's the quality of, the steel or ceramic or whatever it's made of.
Quality
right?
of the blade and comfort of the handle.
Yeah. How does it feel? What shape is it? Is it good at its function? And then the sharpening is going to be on you because even if you buy the world's most expensive, bestest, amazing knife, you have to sharpen it.
Yep.
It's going to go dull. That's just how physics works.
And that's something as I got into my 30s, I started paying more attention to is the care of good knives. Because if you're like us, you cook a lot. Like cooking is one of the things you do often in your life. So I feel like it's very much worth it to have a good set of tools to do cooking with. Cooking with crappy tools is uncomfortable, difficult, and as Scott noted, sometimes dangerous. A dull knife is way more dangerous than a sharp knife. That's not just a thing knife people say. Dull knives are dangerous to use.
Right. A dull knife, you're pushing hard on it, and then when it finally breaks through, if it breaks through, it goes, duh, right? And that sudden, could mean some slippage and then some cutting yourself or who knows. But if you have a sharp knife, it just slides through with no resistance and you just go shaka, 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 shaka. And you just keep your hand away from the sharp part and you won't be cut by the sharp knife, right? Any knife is going to cut you no matter how dull or sharp if you put your hand in the wrong spot. So the danger is our likelihood of cutting yourself when you don't do something foolish.
And I'm not going to try to explain the technique, one, because we're not experts, and two, like...
You can watch a YouTube video to learn
I was about to say, find a YouTube video of chefs using knives and, like, find good ones and do what they do.
There's 10 bajillion videos on YouTube of how to sharpen a knife, how to buy a knife, which knife to get, what knife is for what, and how to use them. So
but these are skills
to talk about it.
That will enrich your life. I highly recommend learning how to use the knives that you have and use in the kitchen and learning the good techniques and making them second nature. Like, I don't have to think about it when I use a knife, and I'm just not going to cut myself because I'm using the techniques that professionals use, and I taught myself that, and I practice that.
So the one thing, though, that you do want to be aware of is the difference between sharpening and honing. Right?
Yeah.
People don't know this. They see that that stick, and they see the chefs like rubbing the knife on the stick, like ching, 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 right? That's honing. What you're doing when you hone is you're not sharpening the knife at all. It's that the edge of the blade might be like, not straight. If you look at it with like a microscope, you'll see it might be warbly or bent to one side, right? And if you just straighten it out to make all the sharp part, in line with itself, right? That's what honing does. And you should hone basically every time you use the knife, or almost every other time, frequently. That's why you see chefs doing it a lot. But that doesn't sharpen the knife. It's still going to go dull. And honing it, no matter how much you hone it, is just going to make it straight and dull. Sharpening, you actually remove material from the knife to make it pointier. And, watch YouTube videos on how to do that. There's several different ways. You can use some stones. You could use an electric sharpener. It really doesn't matter which way. There are differences, but you're just a normal person and not a professional chef, so just sharpen it. And you know what? Sharpen all the other knives you use out of the kitchen as well, right? If you've got a multi-tool, if you got a scissor, the scissor I mentioned has a sharpener that comes with it. It's just a little white stick that's like built into the cover, and you rub the two halves of the scissor, in these slots that are lined up to sharpen the halves of the scissor. And you know what? If you've used a dull scissor, like some kid safety scissors, you'll see the value in sharp scissors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason why, if any of you don't know about this stuff. So if you know anyone who has fabric scissors, if they see you cutting paper with fabric scissors, they might kill you because that's gonna mess those scissors up real quick. But fabric scissors, like well-sharpened scissors, You know when you watch someone who seems like they know what they're doing, like wrapping gifts or like cutting fabric, and they don't even cut. They just kind of slide the scissor and everything just cuts. That's what good scissors can do.
That's right. It also depends on what you're cutting. Not everything you cut can be cut that way.
Yeah. Now, the people I'm suspicious of are the people who talk a lot about their daily carry. That's a term that's mostly used by weirdos who carry guns around, weirdos who carry knives around for purposes other than whittling wood or camping. Like the person who like goes to a convention.
Anything that's tactical that looks like tries to look like it's something that a military person is supposed to have, even though they don't.
You can recognize these people in the wild because they have a knife in their pocket to go to something like a gaming convention or a store. And if they are told they cannot bring their knife into a place, they get weird and mad about it and start talking about how technically it's legal to carry this knife. One, just avoid those people.
It's the right number of inches.
Like, you don't need a knife 99% of the time in your life.
What I'm saying is like there's this sort of fallacy of like these people who, just it's obvious they just want to have a weapon, right? Because it makes them feel big because they're small, right? Same thing with guns, just on a smaller level, and it's like, hey, is the knife really? How often do you really use it? How often do you really have scenarios where you need to use it? Like I have this multi-tool, and for I carried when I was going to an office every day. I just had this in my messenger bag all the time. And when did I use this, actually? Most days I carried it home and carried it back. And when I did have to use it, how often was it the knife that was being used? No. More often it was the scissor.
You know what? You know what I used in my multi-tool? 90% of the time, I was using the screwdriver in it, and the other 10% of the time, I was using the pliers that it turns into.
I think I used the ruler more than I used the knife part, right? It's like, in normal everyday life, unless you're, I don't know, a jungle guide with like a machete or a knife smith, it's like there's only certain professions, right, where a knife is actually getting used, a chef with frequency. Normal people doing office-y shit or retail or whatever, carrying around the knife, that you're just carrying around a knife because you're that kind of guy.
And you know what?
And it's always a guy, right?
If you got a Quiblo kind of job where you're cracking packs, like opening boxes or breaking down boxes, there's a tool you may have heard of called a box cutter that is the right tool for that job.
That's right. That is also a kind of knife.
It is a kind of knife, but
it also doesn't need to be sharpened because you can just pop out another blade and snap the other one off.
Yep. You also don't need
much
blade.
Does a razor count as a knife? Shaven? We don't need to talk about shaven because we got an old episode about that.
What if I put a razor blade in a hot dog? Is that a sandwich or a knife?
Yeah, if I take the hot dog with a razor blade in it and I can swing it around and try to cut things. Like, at what point do you cross the line between knife, short sword, other sword?
Oh, well, that's easy. Knives do 1d4 damage, while short swords do 1d6 damage.
I think
long swords
Who
do
knows
1d8.
if they've changed the rules on us?
Yeah, fuck if I know. You know what? You know what? When I play Baldur's Gate, I just look at damage per. Like, I don't know how much damage my weapons do. I don't actually care that much. I know what damage weapons did in like second ed D&D.
Yeah, it's like, does it even have to be made of metal? Like, if I could get a wood knife, like, Link at the start of his adventure with his little wood sword. Right?
Yep. That is canonically not a wooden sword.
Yeah. If you sharpen anything that's hard and won't break, you can cut things with it. And if it's in a handy shape, that's a knife, right?
Well, I mean, as a kid, how many of you have been in the situation where you're in elementary school and you've got a candy cane, you're sucking on that candy cane, and you never bite the tip off. And eventually, it turns into a dangerous stiletto. And then you poke yourself with it because you find out that it's actually sharp and dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, paper cuts, ceramic knives, stone. You could take stone and sharpen it, right? Stone Age.
So, actually, what the hard, a difficult question to answer would be, would a stiletto count as a knife? Because it's sharp, but only at the very tip.
It's a piercing, pokey one, but not a slashy one.
Dungeons and Dragons classes that as a completely different kind of weapon and a completely different kind of damage. Piercing, slashing, bludgeoning. Butter knives do bludgeoning damage, I'd argue.
I agree. I guess, but you could, if you pushed hard enough, you could pierce with one.
I mean, if you push hard enough, anything can cut anything, I guess.
Not if it's too wide. It's the shape. A butter knife is narrow, right?
True.
And hard. It's still narrow and hard, so you can pierce things with it as long as you have enough force, and the thing you're trying to pierce isn't harder than the butter knife.
The case in point, all of that does not matter to your normal life. So don't be that guy who carries a knife around all the time and talks about his daily carry. You just weird everybody else out. And carry a knife when you have a practical reason to carry one. 99% of that is because you are camping.
Who knows? Someone out there might have an actual job where they're knifing.
Yeah,
right?
you know what?
In which case, you should have a knife that is appropriate to the job you're doing and not, tactical knife, because I guarantee you, anyone listening to this, your job is not tactical combat.
And you know what? If your job is tactical combat, I would be interested in hearing about it, because I still suspect, even in that case, the knife is not exactly the go-to or the most important thing in your job.
And even if it is, it's not the nerf. It's not the knife that is actually useful and best. I would really imagine is not the knife that the knife nerds are buying. They're making YouTube videos. I would imagine it is a different knife that the actual tactical combat people are using.
Yep. But at least in your kitchen, like, the moral of this one is, like, this is one of those rights of adulthood, or rights of someone who just makes their life better. If you cook a lot, learn about the knives you use in the kitchen and get appropriate knives and take care of them. That will make your life better in ways you don't realize. It'll just make a task you do often much more pleasant, much more comfortable, and you'll be better at it, and you're less likely to cut the tip of your finger off, like I did back in the year 2007 was when I cut the tip of my finger off.
Unlike other dangerous tools that exist in the world, right, that have, say, a more limited set of real practical uses, everyone basically is going to encounter knife, right, in their lives and have to use knife to do various tasks. And so not being afraid of knife, learning about them, at least some minimal extent, knowing how to sharpen them, or at least knowing that they need to be sharpened, and knowing how to use them safely can prevent trips to the emergency room. Knives send a lot of people to the emergency room every year.
Yep.
And you can avoid being one of those people, and you can accomplish tasks efficiently in life without fear by purchasing the correct knives and using them in the correct manner.
I actually remembered something I haven't thought about in a long time. So
when you cut your finger?
Oh, no. I mean, that I think about often, because the scar is still there. Like, you can see the line where the tip of my finger was completely cut off. Like that. And I can't feel anything in the tip of that finger.
Good job.
Yeah. But no, not that. So I briefly in college dated someone who actually knew how to knife fight for real and had taken classes and learned this, because this person's mother was a private investigator who needed to know about that, because being a PI is actually kind of a really dangerous job. And there's a whole, like, side story I'm not going to get into. But I was curious, and she taught me, and I learned a little bit about, like, how knife fights actually work in the real world from someone who knew what they were talking about. And if I had to summarize everything I learned, the moral of knife fighting is never, ever, ever get in a knife fight. Everyone involved in a knife fight, but everyone involved in any knife fight gets cut badly. There is no universe where you are in a knife fight and you are not cut, even if you win. Knife fights are the worst possible fights.
I imagine that even if you're in a knife fight and you're the only one with a knife, you have a knife and they don't, you probably still get cut badly.
Yeah, actually.
As long as the other person is like can fight back and they're not, for example,
in fact, to almost quote exactly, the number of people,
in which case it's not really a knife fight, it's more just of a knife torture.
The number of people who will get cut badly in a knife fight is n+1, n being the number of knives involved in the fight.
It could be. I think it's just, if there's one knife and like 5 people, I could imagine all 6 people getting cut.
I mean, basically, if there's a knife in a room where violence is happening, I feel like a lot of people are going to get cut, regardless if the knife is even used in the fight.
Right.
Anyway,
So,
you know a movie where you see like an action hero holding a knife backwards? A lot of people like saw that in a movie once and think, oh, that's how
that's
you
a
hold
good way
knife.
to cut your arm open.
That's a good way to get cut. But you know, you see like two people having a knife fight in a movie and the knives are hitting each other a bunch like it's a sword fight. The way knife fights that actually happen in the real world were described to me, and I got to see some footage of like security camera footage of knife fights that are involved in investigations. Imagine the opposite of that. Almost every time the knife moves, it cuts someone. It's not like you think in the movies. Knife fights are real bad.
No. And it's like Rim cut his finger a tiny bit in the kitchen by
That
accident.
was traumatic emergency room stitches, like big problem.
Right. And in the knife fight, everyone will suffer several such cuts at minimum. One is bad enough. It's like, imagine being there in the emergency room with like 3 or 7 or it's like, no, don't mess it. Don't do it. Just run. If there's a knife fight, run. If you're far away from the knife, it can't cut you.
Don't do what Donnie Don't does.
And knife throwers, almost no one is any good at that. Don't worry. If I'm not too afraid of someone throwing a knife at me, if I'm running and I'm far enough away.
Yep.
I'm not saying I want that to happen. I'm saying that's preferable to being close and then trying to slash me with it, right? If I'm choosing to dodge a thrown knife or deal with a close range, it's like, no,